Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. I was introduced a week or two ago to a fascinating organization that really is trying to deal with people that have got cancer in a far more effective manner. And so, therefore, I wanted to introduce them all to you. I want to start by introducing Marty Tannenbaum, who is the founder of an organization called Cancer Cares, as well as another organization called XCures. Marty, why don't you introduce yourself, the organizations, and the other participants in our discussion today, if you could.
My pleasure, Brian. Cancer Cares, by the way, is Cancer Commons, and Commons comes out of the Boston Commons. It was a place where so many people are trying to, treat cancer, and the goal is to be able to get them all to cooperate for a change with putting the patient first. So this started for me in a very personal way. I had a storybook career as an AI researcher and e-commerce entrepreneur, and I was at the very beginning of both of those fields. So how lucky is that? And then right in the peak of the dot-com boom, I get cancer and diagnosed with melanoma metastatic to liver, which was basically a fatal disease. The prognosis was horrible. That was 20 years ago. And I bet my life on a clinical trial that failed, but I was fortunate enough to be in this exceptional responder to that trial. And that gave me religion. I said, I need to take my skills as an AI and e-commerce guy and see if I can figure out how to do something to help other patients who are facing a wicked prognosis and maybe didn't have quite all the resources that I did. So I started this nonprofit called Cancer Commons to help people who had advanced cancer patients who had exhausted all of the standard treatments. And what we do is they come to us, we do research with PhD scientists, and we give them options that they might not have seen otherwise. And then we go further. We help them get access to those options. And then we study how they do. And we use that in a real-time learning loop, which is quite different than the way the system works today. Always patient first, always doing what's best for the patient, and then closing the loop so that they learn. 2 years ago, and so we've done almost 10,000 patients to date.
10,000 people that have joined the Cancer Commons.
That have been helped by us. Either they were direct patients or caregivers of patients, some physicians. And I'm very, very proud of that. That number is about the same as any large cancer center, and the number of patients that have exhausted all the options and the clinical trial options as well and come to us. But I'm both proud and still so much more to be done, because 10,000 patients over 10 years, right? 1,000 patients a year. That's kind of what we could do with manual processes. And so what I did 2 years ago is I said, how can we scale this? And the amount of research we do for each patient at the moment is a lot of work, a lot of time consuming. And there's not much leveraging of one patient to help the next. So we developed what we learned from one patient to help the next. So what we did was spun off a technology, a health tech company called XCures, and to develop the software and services to be able to do this at scale. And we now have the technology platform, which Mika is going to tell you about, that will allow us to handle most of the patients in a kind of self-serve way. They come to us, they tell us about what their issues are, they give us access to their medical records, and we give them back some good options based on the research that has been done over 10,000 patients over the years. But then every now and then a patient will come along that we don't have good options for, and then we'll have to convene what we call a virtual tumor board. Tumor boards are in medical centers where everyone gets together to discuss a case, and we're doing it virtually, which means that people are discussing it using Slack, text, email, those kinds of things. And then we can mine this back and forth to be able to get new insights that can then go in, and the insights for this one patient who needed some additional options, those insights can help 10 or 100 or 1,000 other patients. So that's the whole basis. We have now a nonprofit, Cancer Commons, a for-profit, XCures. And if everything works out well, the nonprofit is one of the largest shareholders in the for-profit. We'll have an endowment. So hope that makes it all make sense to you.
Well, it sounds quite impressive and hopefully encouraging for anyone that has got cancer and is looking for some help in dealing with their situation and answers for what they can do. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back more with Mika, Erica, and Marty in just a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. We're talking about a fascinating two organizations that I've become aware of recently, Cancer Commons, which is a not-for-profit that really tries to help people deal with cancer and what the different potential clinical trials and other things that are going on that might assist them, and XCures, which is a way of scaling Cancer Commons to a greater population. We're going to delve now for the next couple of minutes into Cancer Commons. Marty, maybe you could introduce us to Erica, tell us a little bit about her background, and then Erica, you can take it away and explain Cancer Commons if that's possible.
I'll tell a little bit about Erica's background, but I think she knows much better than I do. The one thing I can say is that I was very lucky to have met Erica when she was fresh out of business school. Oh, no, not even business school yet. You were fresh out of college. And I gave her her first job out of college. She was my executive assistant when I was running an organization called CommerceNet. And she was terrific then. And then she went on to an illustrious career. And after that, went off to raise a family. And I wanted to get back in the game. And I was fortunate enough to have run into her again. It didn't take me a second to say, why don't you come volunteer at Cancer Commons? And 18 months later, she was running the place. So Erica, fill in a little bit more of that background.
Well, that was an interesting intro by Marty about what Cancer Commons and XCures is all about. I'd now like to introduce you to the person that actually runs the Cancer Commons, and that is Erica Monteverdi. Is that correct? Erica Monteverdi?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you. Erica, let me first ask you, how did you get connected with Cancer Commons, and what's your background?
It's actually an interesting story because I met Marty Tenenbaum over 20 years ago. He was actually my first boss out of college. And at the time he was working on what is this internet thing and how does it work? And I was part of that company called CommerceNet. We created the standards of conducting business online. So I too come from an e-commerce background and technology and marketing. I went off to get my MBA and then began doing business strategy consulting for fairly large organizations. And after having a family, really wanted to turn my attention towards using my skills for something very purposeful and joined Cancer Commons about 4 years ago and started leading the organization 2 years ago.
Excellent. Sounds kind of interesting. And I've got to tell you, I've never seen such a big, beautiful book collection behind someone in my life. Like, what are all those books of?
A lot of books on leadership, business, and some on health, and a lot of fiction. And I would say also historical novels, which is a passion of mine. So.
Well, it's quite the collection. And your MBA, and I understand you have a DBA as well. Where's your MBA from? And a DBA, that's kind of unusual.
I actually got my MBA in Milan from it was a top-rated European school. It was actually number 4 in the world at the time, called Bocconi. And I focused on information systems. So again, with a technology focus. Hence took my e-commerce experience with Marty, to different levels, was involved in a startup which got sold to a media company, and then went on to do some CRM work. So really engagement with consumers. In Cancer Commons, it's about engagement.
What's CRM, just in case people don't know?
Customer relationship management. So technology that is developed to aid in communicating with, new customers, loyal customers, everything that's involved with engaging your customer base.
And the DBA?
DBA, I don't know what you're referring to.
Oh, it says on your resume you have a DBA as well, but okay, never mind.
Okay. That must be, so I have a double major in economics and political science. Maybe that's, I don't know if that's probably what's related.
Okay, great. And so I apologize. Tell me about Cancer Commons then. What is it all about?
So Cancer Commons was actually born a decade ago. And in this decade, we've helped about 10,000 people with advanced cancer. And what I mean by advanced cancer is everyone who's past the standard of care or has been on previous treatments that have failed them before. They are those who also receive really dire diagnoses, unfortunately, of stage 4 or metastatic cancer. And we have developed a patient-centric network that invites patients to sign up with our services in order to have PhD science researchers, academic experts, treating physicians from different institutions that all come together to collectively reason around what is the next best thing for a given patient to do. So we're actively pulling together the latest scientific evidence, and doing so, I think, compassionately, because we really want to be kind of a knowledge clearinghouse for patients and their caretakers, providing scientific evidence around what is the next best treatment. The goal is
these PhD students are what? They're volunteers. They're hired. They're PhD students in medicine or in cancer or what?
So these are PhD science researchers. They are hired in Cancer Commons. I hire nurse oncologists, PhD researchers, and academic experts, meaning active oncologists that are working in academic centers, like the Harvard system, for example, or Stanford, and many others that all come together to really bring their expertise and their experience, wrapping it around, what is the next best thing for patients. So we're providing, patients who, quite frankly, are struggling with having to navigate their own care. They're asking themselves, okay, everything has failed me, now what? And how do I know that, one institution or one person can possibly know all the options that are available to me? So we want to act as really agnostic to any one institution or entity, doing what's right for patients. Not, I think doing what is right in order or collecting the data around what drug treatments work, but really matching options to patients. So really shifting the paradigm in terms of, instead of doing clinical trials based on, what works for a drug, it's really what is the best treatment for a given patient. And then collecting data over time, following this patient's progress to understand what's working and what's not, applying that knowledge to the next similar patient, and thereby creating a learning system in advance.
So rather than just getting a doctor that is an oncologist or something like that, that's going to review your situation and all the studies that have been done and provide a treatment, you're actually reviewing it with a couple of PhD scientists that are experts in oncology and getting a arguably almost academically oriented second opinion.
Yeah, I would actually say that it can be even better than a second opinion in the following sense. There are different levels of expertise that are all coming together to work on a patient's situation. We consider everything that you would need in order to get a second opinion. So the data around molecular diagnostics, current treatment, past treatment, but also consider what are the patient's goals and what are their preferences? How far can they travel? What is their financial situation? Because one thing is coming up with what is the best option, and another thing is actually trying to facilitate access to that option. An option is only an option if you can actually get access to it. And so we also look at facilitating access to treatment, either through clinical trials or what's called expanded access programs. It's compassionate use of a drug treatment, and through really different approaches that includes also off-label use, really acting on behalf of the patient and what is best for them.
Is this appropriate for anyone with cancer, or only for the people with the worst, most advanced, untreatable cases?
Our focus is on the most advanced cancer because there's standard of care protocols and NCCN guidelines that are followed for other earlier stage cancers. Having said that, unfortunately, a large percentage of certain cancer types, like pancreatic or brain cancer, end up needing Cancer Commons services. I think, curing these kind of late stage cancers is very challenging, but we think getting these patients to the next promising treatment is attainable with a better quality of life, and that's our goal.
How have you done so far? Do you have a way of being able to analyze what your success ratio is?
We know that, there's a few metrics that we're tracking. The most important of which is, the first is patient satisfaction. How likely is a patient or a caretaker to, talk about Cancer Commons to others and to refer us to others. And we have a 98% score on that. In industry, it's called the Net Promoter Score. And we're very proud of that metric and the ability to be able to continue to do this for patients. The second metric is based on, how is our information, which is really in a Cancer Commons report that's delivered back to patients and their treating physicians. How is that report informing the treatment decision of the physician and the patient? And how are we doing in terms of facilitating shared decision-making? We have evidence that what we've been able to do by bringing this collective network together is providing the right information. It is validating some of the decisions that treating physicians are making. It can also change the course of treatment. And it certainly is providing additional options that neither the patient nor the physician thought about before. And that's really because we're, taking a look at each and every case at a deep level. We spend a lot of time and resources on each and every patient's case. We're able to do so, and we're hoping that by doing that, we will provide patients to the best personalized options, and to treating physicians, to become a trusted source for those options. And for academics, physicians that work with us, just the ability to share their experience. Because a lot of times these are very sick, one-of-a-kind patients. And so bringing expertise from different organizations across kind of knowledge and data silos is something that is very useful.
I just think that it sounds fantastic. I lost my best friend of 40 years to neoblastoma brain cancer just a few months ago. And he was, he had described to him so many different potential things that he could do. And he ended up choosing being put onto a trial for a new immunotherapy therapy. And obviously it didn't work in the end. But it's almost a dizzying array of information that you're provided, and choices that you have to make, and decisions you have to make about life and death. So having your kind of service available sounds like it would be spectacular. Does it cost money to join?
It does not. We actually do all of this for free for patients. We are 100% philanthropically supported. Of course, that means that we have a part of our organization, albeit a small part, that raises philanthropic dollars. We do so with individuals that have been affected by cancer. Some patients that can pay it forward for other patients do so, which is very helpful. And also, there are quite a few executives, or former executives even, in the healthcare industry that feel that our process is beneficial. They understand the transformative nature of what we're trying to do. And they think it's simply just the right thing to do by patients, and that it should be a model adopted by all of oncology, to be able to provide patients with this kind of deep research, especially those that are in the later stages of cancer.
Is this available only for Americans, or is it available for people globally?
We have traditionally helped people in over 69 countries. We are now focused on the United States, primarily because of our partner XCures in building the technology and being able to collect medical records and following regulatory policies. We're really focused on proving our model in the United States first, but we are very open to working with other organizations internationally and even licensing Cancer Commons to them. And I hope to be able to do more of that actually at the latter part of 2021.
Excellent. If people want to check you out or join, how do they best do that?
You can simply go to cancercommons.org. There is a place for you to get help. You sign up, give us consent to pull your medical records. We will structure those records. We will connect the clinical data and your patient preferences to the top treatment options. And then you will be assigned a personal guide throughout the rest of your journey that acts as really a knowledge clearinghouse, helping you make the most important decisions of your life.
Erica Monteverdi, the head of Cancer Commons, thank you so much for that. That was an excellent overview of what I think would be a very valuable addition to anyone who's dealing with cancer and or cancer in their family to check out and consider. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back with the head of XCures, which is a technology company that is trying to scale what Cancer Commons is all about to a far larger impact. Stay with us. Marty, you had something you wanted to say about clinical trials?
I do. The challenge of clinical trials from a patient's perspective is that these trials are designed not to cure patients. They're designed to approve drugs, to get the data that are needed to get a drug to market. And so they put inclusion and exclusion criteria on the trials in order to be able to get the healthiest patients that they think they have a best chance of curing. Unfortunately, most of the patients that we get to see are very sick and out of options. And so even if we want to send them to a clinical trial, the likelihood of them getting into a trial, these are not the patients that most of the pharma companies are looking for.
Right.
And there's a second problem that is even more perverse, which is that I've never met a medical facility that is willing to refer a patient to a clinical trial that's run by anyone else, because then they lose the patient. And so, it's what we're trying to do in setting up the system that we're doing is to be able to bring the drugs to the patient. Does that make sense?
Well, I think a lot of us have become sort of more aware of this of late when we've seen all these people that have been on the trials for the COVID-19 vaccines, not in cancer, obviously, but the COVID-19 vaccines, and that they did not include any people that had allergic reactions. And that on the very first day, surprise, surprise, two people that took the vaccine in the UK had allergic reactions because they had in the past allergic reactions. And so clearly people get excluded from clinical trials that don't have some of the complicating factors. But then also one of the interesting things that we found out about is this compassionate use, which President Donald Trump was given compassionate use of a product that had not yet been approved in a clinical trial. Is that how you would get people access by effectively a compassionate use process?
Mika, why don't you jump in and take this one?
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you, Marty. Thank you, Brian. Yeah, so we leverage compassionate use as a mechanism for getting an investigational, that's unapproved therapies to patients on a routine basis. And the term that you'll hear used, which is what the FDA calls it, is expanded access. So there's a couple of different ways. And emergency use and compassionate access, all those basically fall into a part of the regulations known as expanded access. Now, there's different levels of expanded access. So you can look at expanded access as being for an individual person. So this is a single patient for whom there's an emergency use authorization. And we already saw that in COVID with the delivery of specific COVID treatments to a single person. Right, and that's a single point with the doctor doing it. There's something called an intermediate protocol, which we use pretty often, which is where you can open what's a study. Think of it as a clinical study for the people who can't get into the clinical trial because there's no clinical trial, but for whom the doctors believe the benefits outweigh the harms. And that's really important. There has to be a good medical reason to believe the benefits outweigh the harms. But you can create what's essentially a description of that group of people on an intermediate basis. And then there's the final level, which is what we're seeing now, which are what we call treatment protocols. So that is where there is a widespread reason to believe that the benefits outweigh the risks and the harms, and it's going to be open to anybody under a specific protocol for treatment. And that's the kind of level that we've seen to. So the point is there's a number of ways to do this, but it's a very interesting way to be able to get these experimental medicines to people outside of clinical trials and to basically shorten the time period to access, because getting all the way through the process of marketing authorization takes some time, as it should, because we want to be safe and diligent about it. And so it's good, actually, that we have some basically workarounds and ways to get access earlier in the process.
We're chatting tonight with Marty Tannenbaum, Mika Newton, and Erica Monteverdi. Is that correct? Monteverdi? I apologize. About Cancer Commons
Monteverdi.
Monteverdi, about Cancer Commons and X Cures. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back more with this pretty impressive team in just a minute. Stay with us. Well, welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour, Saga 960. I come to you every Monday through Friday at 6 o'clock on 960 AM or streamed online at www.saga960am.ca, or you can get all my podcasts and videocasts the next day on my website, briancrombie.com. Fascinating conversation tonight with Marty Tannenbaum, who told us the story about how he personally was impacted by melanoma and realized that he needed to create something that would help cancer patients access the information that was out there, the clinical trials that were out there. And he created something called the Cancer Commons, comparable to the Boston Commons, that allowed people to get together and share data and share information. And over the course of the last 10 years, they've helped 10,000 patients that have accessed Cancer Commons. And Cancer Commons today is run by Erica Monteverdi, and she's just given us a great description. But then they wanted to scale it. And so 2 years ago, they launched a company by the name of X Cures, which is the for-profit arm to add to the not-for-profit philanthropic arm of Cancer Commons. And Mika Newton is the gentleman that runs X Cures. And Mika, take it away and explain to us what scaling it means and what's X Cures doing to scale it.
Sure. Thank you so much, Brian. So, so when I became aware of Cancer Commons, I guess it's 2.5 years ago now, they had created the company and started looking at what exactly is the technology that one needs to develop to not only be able to help 600 or 1,000 patients a year, but maybe 10,000 patients a year, or 50,000 or 100,000 plus patients per year. And that really takes kind of a fresh, you have to take a fresh look at things. This is not just a process improvement question. It's about doing things differently from the start. So if you think about the way that decision-making has been made in cancer, and you go back before the internet, before we had, I think some of us still remember that time, basically your doctor treated you with whatever they had learned in medical school or they read about in medical texts, et cetera. The next thing that happened is the internet came along and we started creating public databases, and a lot of resources started becoming available online. And we all leverage these every day. Anytime we learn about something new, I think most of us naturally just go and Google it. Let's Google it and see what happens. The issue with something as complicated as cancer, and in particular advanced cancers, is as soon as you start Googling the subject, you very quickly get down into kind of the scientific, minutiae is the wrong word, but the very specific issues that are being studied around a particular condition. And it's not particularly relevant in the situation of trying to figure out what your treatment is. It's interesting information, but it needs to be synthesized and made valuable. So Cancer Commons really started from the premise of helping patients and their physicians bring that information together and focus on what's important. And it has two elements to it. Number one, it has the patient element, which is most patients don't understand the full complexity of the disease. Neither do they need to, but they need to focus on the things that are important. And they're in a time-sensitive situation where you have a dire disease, right? You're at risk of dying, and you want to do things quickly, and you want to do the right things and make the right decisions. On the flip side of that, you have oncologists. And in the United States, for instance, we only have 13,000 oncologists. And the American Society of Clinical Oncology expects that we're going to be over 2,200 or so oncologists short just by 2025, because the rate of demand for oncology services with an aging population is growing so quickly. So that means that in that instant, when the patient is in the doctor's office, having the conversation and the physician is thinking about that, this is an incredibly valuable, precious set of time. So how do we put the right information together in that setting in the right way? And we want to do it with technology. It's the only way to do it at scale. So we've focused on and solved three platform problems, right? Three challenges that we had. Number one, how can we find out where the patient is today clinically, their clinical record, anywhere in the United States? And then how do we follow them over time? So how do you know what happened? Because you're going to go into this situation, some decision is going to be made, and then we'd really like to know what happened. Did it work? Good, bad, indifferent, right? How does that happen? And so we've created a platform that enables patients who come through organizations like Cancer Commons to get their data onto the platform. And they do it using the HIPAA privacy law in the United States, which enables them to give their data. It belongs to the patients to third parties, and we are such a third party. So we capture it. The good news—
So let me interrupt, Mika. Is this therefore only available to people in the United States, or is it available to people globally?
So the Extras platform is focused to start in the United States, and then we're working now to understand the different regulatory mechanisms. Every country's got its own. I think we've all talked a lot about GDPR in Europe, for instance. There's different healthcare requirements in each country. We've looked at India in particular, and perhaps even China as having their own systems, but the current platform is operating in the United States.
Okay, sorry, go on.
Yeah, so we leverage HIPAA. It allows us to get access to the data. The patients give it to us. It's the way that they participate on the platform. And we structure basically a medical record from that. The good news is that that is every patient's right to give their data to someone. The bad news is oncology data is complicated, and you actually receive things like CD-ROMs and 1,000-page PDFs of medical records, et cetera. So there's a lot of work and technology we have to develop to make this very efficient, to make the data structured and ready. And by the way, that same transfer mechanism is how most hospitals transfer data between each other. It's via fax or unstructured data. So there's a lot of kind of data aggregation and destructuring that takes place between the visits, and we figured out how to untangle that. The reason patients give us their data is because they want access to an options library, which is basically the catalog of all the things you would think about doing. This is what the scientists at Cancer Commons have got so good at researching and curating. And so we want to make a catalog, and a catalog needs to have certain elements. Number one, we want to have the thing that you're going to do, which isn't just a single drug. It might be you're going to have surgery. You might take one of these immuno-oncology drugs, which help your immune system recognize and target the cancer tumor in your body. You may use a targeted therapy, which is a drug that's designed to target a very specific protein on your tumor or a specific mechanism inside of your tumor. So it's a very personalized treatment. And you may do radiation afterwards. So when you go to your oncologist, they're going to recommend some combination of these things. So we want to build these combinations along with the rationale. So why would a doctor looking at you think about doing one of these things? They need to understand the why. So it's the what is it, the why you would use it, and then as we were talking about and have been talking about, the how can I get it? Because there's no point, Brian, in me telling you or anyone who uses our platform and telling you about some option if we don't actually know how you can get access to it. And then the last piece, and this is where our company specializes, it's where our proprietary technology is around the software tools and algorithms and modeling that we do to decide, based on who you are today, the situation you are in, what are the 5, 10, 15 most important things to be thinking about out of potentially hundreds or even thousands of potential options? And that's really critical. And we do that basically on 3 levels. Number one, what are the similarities between who you are and the situation that you're in and the medical rationale? So how do we match those 2 things together? Number 2, predictive models. So we want to try to say if we can do A, B, or C, how well, or what do we think is going to happen on A, how well are we going to do on B or C, and actually do a prediction of a forecast, essentially, of how well you're going to survive or what side effects might you experience, all of those for each one of those things. And then lastly, because in oncology and in particular advanced cancer, nobody really knows what to do. It doesn't matter. If we knew what to do, we wouldn't have the issue in the first place. How do we bring together expert insights? So we built a platform that enables your oncologist to link with this virtual tumor board concept. So think of a group of other physicians who will be able to have an opinion and provide their own insight, and we can synthesize that. And tumor boards are run across multiple organizations on a continuous basis. What we do that's very different is focus on the dialogue between the physicians. So why do they say what they're going to do? And when you bring those three capabilities together, right, you're able to very efficiently take patients, enable them through whatever organization they're coming through to capture the data on where they are and how they're going to do, pick the right things to do, and then learn from every experience, which is really the important part of this process.
Fascinating. Now, Marty had said that one of his initial companies was in AI. Are you using artificial intelligence or machine learning to help you with these algorithms and these diagnoses?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've really focused on kind of two technical aspects. The first is natural language processing. So how do we get our software to be able to read the medical record so that if I get 1,000 pages, I need to know what's in it so that I don't have to read all 1,000 pages. So what I want to be able to do is recognize oncology-specific terminology and concepts throughout that document. I can also use that same natural language processing to build my library. So if I want to go off and read everything on clinicaltrials.gov or in the cancer guidelines for care, et cetera, I'd like to be able to do that without having to have a human being go and type all of that. Now, it all needs to be curated and corrected, but a good deal of the work can be done through natural language processing. The other thing that it enables us to do is to understand this idea of concepts. So a big part of the way you and I speak with each other is we understand the concepts we're talking about. If we can teach our platform the concepts that appear, it becomes a very good way to make recommendations. So think of simply a Netscape or an Amazon or whoever. If you're going to watch a movie or to buy some product, it knows something about you and it can then make recommendations. And it's because it can make the correlations in the background between who you are and what might be important to you. So we're using a similar sort of approach there. The other part that we use is kind of more machine learning in some way, but also predictive modeling. And we use what's called a Bayesian hierarchical model. So it's an explainable model of why we think drug A is going to do better than drug B, or why the combination or A and B might be better than the other. And it really uses as its basis the idea that we have an expectation, right, of what we expect to see based on the data that's been produced to date. And if we see a variance from it, right, then something's changed. So the idea is to use all of the best current knowledge and then look for things that aren't behaving as we'd expect them to do. And that gives us areas to focus in on. So that predictive model actually helps guide our learning itself.
So this predictive model that you describe with particularly the 10,000 people that have already gone through Cancer Commons, and then as you scale all the people that go through Cancer Commons and XCures, I can imagine will give you an incredible database as to what problems people have, what cancers they have, what tumors they have, and what ends up happening. Because today, really, doctors are making the decisions based, number one, on the clinical trial information, and number two, their own personal experience. And you're going to be able to add to that this 10,000 and growing database of other patients and what's worked. Is that not correct?
That's absolutely right, Brian. So what we do is take that data. So there's all of the public data, everything that we know today, right? Then there's new ideas. So think of the hypotheses or new treatment ideas that a doctor may have. I haven't tried this before. I wonder if it's ever worked. Well, you'd like to know, has anybody else ever tried that thing before? All right, so you want to be able to look into that data, even if it's just one or two people, and start to understand, is this something I should try or not try? And so every person that flows on essentially gives us an opportunity to update our information and to share that knowledge. And what it means is that instead of running kind of a formal trial to test something, what we can do is look for emerging signals. So think of it more as watching the data and saying, hey, there's something going on over here that we didn't expect to see or that's different than what we would have expected to see, right? That's something that deserves focus. And that may eventually lead into a formal clinical trial, but we don't have to try to pick what we don't know in the first place. So it's a very efficient and kind of holistically a dynamic way to try to understand what's going on in cancer.
I did an interview with someone associated with what was at the time IBM Watson, and they talked about AI analyses of radiology and how they could do a far better job of determining what there was that they were looking for than the actual radiologists could. Do you think that's where you're going to end up? Is that you can do a far better job than the doctors in trying to determine what the tumor is and what the right diagnosis is and what the right strategy to deal with it is?
You know, it's interesting you bring that up, because I think of the opportunity in AI as augmented intelligence. It's about helping the doctors be more efficient versus necessarily telling them what they should be doing. So the example you give in radiology is an interesting one. It's actually a really good use of the purely kind of predictive AI, in the sense that if you're a radiologist and you're looking at pictures of, let's say, mammography scans, right? You're looking at one after another, after another, after another, after another. Most of them are fine, but every now and then one comes along which has got something going on and you need to focus on. So wouldn't it be better if we just brought those to the front of the pile, right, as best as possible, so that you could spend your time? Because, you know, people get tired and these are complex decisions to make. So I think that the opportunity is really exists to augment that. And then over time, we will find the tasks for which humans are much better suited than computers, and really manage essentially the relationship between the two. So when I think about what we're trying to do at XCures, what we're focused on is this interaction where the patient and the oncologist are together for this very precious 20 to 40 minutes worth of time, and picking the topics of discussion. Like, what is it that we should be spending our time discussing from an options perspective of what are we going to pursue in that meeting is critical. And so I don't view it as we are going to provide necessarily anytime in the immediate future, this is the right answer. But what we're saying is, these are the 5-10 things that you should really be thinking about, and you should be putting extra effort into understanding. So it's much more about prioritization and then providing supportive data. And then of course we want to learn from that, right? So if we prioritize things and they eventually move their way up, they will have some level in that ranking itself.
But I think what you're doing is you're really providing this data and the algorithms and the analysis of the data via the algorithm to try to figure out what the best solution is for people that have got issues. And one option is you go to see one oncologist. Maybe you can go get a second opinion. The second option is you go to Cancer Commons and you get these PhDs that are going to give you the advice. The third option is you go to XCures and you can get the historical database of 10,000 plus more growing people over time that can effectively assist you. Let me ask you a question in regards to privacy, though. And frankly, this whole last couple of months with COVID-19, we've had this sort of tussle between community value versus private rights. And really what the key is, I think, is that what you're saying is that the community value of your health information is worth a lot when it's amalgamated with 10,000 plus other people, because it gives us this database to understand better. But aren't people going to be worried that, their privacy has been breached and all of a sudden their information is now no longer just their private ownership? The XCures owns it and it's analyzing all that with a whole bunch of other people to try to figure out what to do?
Yeah, should be a great point. So I think that the real key to data privacy is actually to let people choose themselves. So what I want is control over my data. I want to make the decision about who gets access to my data and who uses it. And so if I'm going to participate in a program such as the one that Cancer Commons runs, or using XCures technology, or into somebody else who may use XCures technology, I want to be able to essentially participate with my data. And I need to understand, and we focus very clearly on the informed consent up front, that if you put your data into this platform, right, you will get something valuable back, which are these options. So it's not like I'm just, hey, give me your data for research. Thank you very much. It'll be used for the public good down the road. This is, give me your data and I will help you tomorrow or the day after with an important decision in your life. And by the way, I want to be able to do the same for a lot of other people and run our business. And so I'm going to use that data in that way. And then I also need to be explicit about what are the technology and privacy things that have been put in place. So for instance, we hold all the data in a HIPAA compliant secured service. So just like your your data would be held in any hospital or treating facility. We have all of the same architecture and infrastructure. When we combine the data, we de-identify it, right? So we actually take out all of the personal identifiers, right, that aren't required for the use, et cetera. So there's an entire informed consent and management process that needs to be in place. And I just think that we need to all be very transparent about this and very clear about the value. So if you're going to ask me for my data, tell me what I personally, am going to get back from it, right? Overall. And I think that helps alleviate what's frankly a tricky problem.
Mika, if I'm a cancer patient or I'm a caregiver of a cancer patient, do I sign up and join Cancer Commons or XCures or what?
Yeah, so I think if you're an advanced cancer patient who'd like to access the type of tools and services we have, I would recommend you go to Cancer Commons. You'll see right on their website when you sign up, they use our tools and have, frankly, we've built our tools based on their decades of experience. Overall, we're now in the process, as our business has been growing over the last few years, of taking our tools and implementing them in other networks and other centers. And so that will grow. I would say what you should do is just look for the fact that it's run by or powered by XCures. And then you'll understand that technology. And if you came to our website, we would help direct you to any one of those service providers as well.
Fascinating conversation tonight with Marty Tannenbaum, Erica Monteverdi, and Mika Newton about Cancer Commons and XCures. We're going to take a break for a message and come back with some concluding comments in just a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. As some of you know, I've been involved in the pharmaceutical industry and the medical device industry, and I've become incredibly motivated by the power of large databases and algorithms. And it sounds like XCures and Cancer Commons is doing exactly that, and could be a breakthrough for how we diagnose and deal with cancer patients. Mika, what do you think the future of your XCures business is?
Yeah, thank you, Brian. Well, first of all, thank you for having us on the show. Really appreciate it. I think the future for XCures now is about scale. We spent basically the last 2 years building our platform technology. We've implemented and proved it can be successful over our first cohort of patients. So we put 600 patients through the platform. We'll do about 2,000 patients next year on our way to 10,000 the year after. And we've also built a business partnering with the biopharmaceutical industry, as well as other providers of products and services to advance cancer, that's creating a really healthy, sustainable revenue stream that's growing this. So at this time, we're fundraising. I think we're getting close to bringing together the folks that we need in order to really inject the additional capital into this. Always interested in talking to new investors. And where it takes us is over the next 3 years, really to the point where we can operate this platform across the 600,000 advanced cancer patients in the United States and start moving that data. So it's really about time to scale now and developing that technology. I think when we do that, then we'll also start seeking global partners. We talked a little bit about that earlier, and start moving on essentially implementing these same processes with the data and privacy rights that are required in each of the countries or territories that we look at there. So it's just a really exciting time. We had an idea, we've proved that it can be done and that it works. Now it's time to grow it and really grow it into a big, big business.
Erica, what's the future for Cancer Commons?
Well, I think Cancer Commons has helped about 10,000 people, but there's 600,000 people a year that need us, right? And so, our future is being able to use technology when and where it makes sense. But it's also about providing, a human-to-human touch, because when you get diagnosed with advanced cancer, it is an extremely paralyzing situation. And you need an organization like Cancer Commons to kind of differentiate, as Mika was saying, the signal from the noise, right? We're inundated with data, physicians and patients alike. Cancer Commons can use technology when it makes sense, and to be able to pinpoint what patients and treating physicians should pay attention to. So if you've been treated for cancer, but your cancer has returned, if you've searched Dr. Google, right, and you get thousands of responses, most of them irrelevant, right, to you. If you're overwhelmed and confused and you're seeking second opinions and you're getting conflicting recommendations, you need to make life and death decisions. Time is a matter of urgency. Cancer Commons is the organization that's here to help you. So please do come to us, cancercommons.org, and we will help you get the right plan of action. Thank you again.
Thank you. Marty, you've really put together quite the two businesses here. Thank you so much.
My goal, Brian, is to put together all of oncology, because cancer is very complicated. There's no one on the planet who knows the optimal way to use any of the drugs that we currently have available, much less the new drugs that are coming down the pipeline. We don't know the optimal way to treat any cancer with those drugs, because these drugs have to get used in multi-drug regimens and multi-therapy regimens, not just drugs. And the number of ways to be able to combine, 1,000 drugs to treat individual patients explodes very quickly, right? Just the combinatorics of all those things. And then every cancer is unique. And so if you think about that, the dimensionality of this search, the space of possible treatments for all the different types of subtypes of cancer there are, is overwhelming. And the current way we know how to figure out what's the best way to treat cancer is a clinical trial, which takes a long time to complete, costs a lot of money, and basically answers a very narrow question, which is, does this particular regimen work in this particular cohort of patients? There's a kind of complete inconsistency at that level. What we need to do is find a way to be able to learn from all patients on all treatments all the time. And this is not just a job for two companies or two organizations. It involves everyone in oncology. So what XCures is developing is, for want of a better word, the operating system for cancer, to be able to take the people who have treatments and ideas for treatments that might be helpful to a patient, and the patients over here, and connect them with each other so that the people who need help can get the help that they need. And then all the other pieces that are necessary to lubricate that marketplace, to be able to get access to the drugs, to get them paid for, to get the tests developed so you know what you're doing, if you see what I'm saying. And this doesn't exist today. And it's something that I know well from my background in e-commerce. So what I'm trying to do is build the operating system, assemble the ecosystem, and that's everyone involved in cancer. If you either need help or have some services that can help a cancer patient, or want to be able to help any of us as investors or as philanthropists, now's the time. Please do reach out.
Marty, Erica, and Mika, thank you so much for joining us. cancercommons.org if you're interested. Thank you very much for a really fascinating conversation this evening. That's our show for tonight. Good night, everybody.